I never thought a snow shovel would land me in small claims court. But here I am, sitting across from the most insufferable woman in Colorado Springs, watching her try to explain to a judge why she thought stealing my property was perfectly acceptable HOA enforcement. My name is Isaac Coleman, and I have lived in the Pinewood Heights subdivision for 3 years now. It is a decent neighborhood on the north side of Colorado Springs, with rows of identical beige houses, manicured lawns, and the kind of people who wave at you but do not actually know your name. The mountains are visible from my bedroom window, and when I first moved here, I thought I had found the perfect place to settle down after my divorce. I was 34, working as a software engineer from home, and I just wanted peace and quiet. What I got instead was Patricia Henderson, the HOA president, and the most entitled woman I have ever had the displeasure of meeting. Patricia was 52 years old, with that particular haircut that screams for a manager from a mile away. You know the one, short in the back, longer in the front, highlighted blonde with dark roots showing through. She wore velour tracksuits in various shades of pink and purple, always had her nails done in aggressive patterns, and drove a white Mercedes SUV with a personalized plate that read, HOPRES. She took her position on the Homeowners Association board more seriously than most people take their actual careers. The trouble started in January, during one of those late winter storms that dump 2 feet of snow on Colorado overnight. I woke up on a Tuesday morning to find my driveway completely buried, my car invisible under a thick white blanket, and the street barely passable. I made myself coffee, pulled on my winter gear, and headed out to start the miserable process of digging out. That was when I discovered my snow shovel was missing. I kept it on my covered front porch, leaning against the wall next to my front door. It was a good shovel too, one of those ergonomic ones with the curved handle that saves your back. I had paid $60 for it at the hardware store, and it had lasted me through 3 winters without any problems. But that morning, it was just gone. I stood there in my driveway, hands on my hips, staring at the empty spot where my shovel should have been. My first thought was that maybe I had left it somewhere else, maybe in the garage or around back. I checked everywhere, trudging through knee-deep snow, getting more frustrated by the minute. Nothing. The shovel had vanished. I ended up having to drive to the store in my snow-covered car, which was an adventure in itself, and buy a new shovel just so I could dig myself out properly. By the time I got back home and finished clearing my driveway, it was almost noon and I was exhausted and annoyed. I figured maybe some neighborhood kid had borrowed it or something. It was weird, but I tried not to let it bother me too much. 2 days later, another smaller storm came through, dropping about 6 inches overnight. I went out to my porch the next morning and my brand new shovel was gone too. This was not a coincidence. Someone was actively stealing my snow shovels. I was angry now. $70 total down the drain for 2 shovels, plus the inconvenience of having to go buy yet another one. But this time, I had a plan. I still had a security camera from my old house, one of those wireless ones that connects to your phone. I spent Friday afternoon installing it above my front door, angling it to cover the porch and part of the driveway. The camera had night vision, motion detection, and stored everything to the cloud. If someone came for shovel number 3, I would have them on video. I bought a 3rd shovel that weekend, another $60 ergonomic model, and placed it in the exact same spot on my porch. Then I waited. The snow held off for almost a week, but the following Thursday, the forecast called for a major storm. That night, I went to bed watching the snow begin to fall, already dreading the morning dig out. But I also felt a little thrill of anticipation. If the shovel thief struck again, I would finally have proof. I woke up Friday morning to 18 inches of fresh powder and checked my phone before I even got out of bed. Sure enough, I had a motion alert from the camera at 6:47 a.m. My heart pounded as I opened the app and pulled up the footage. There she was, clear as day. Patricia Henderson, HOA president and neighborhood busybody, walking up to my porch in her puffy purple coat and matching boots. She looked around, checking to see if anyone was watching, and then grabbed my snow shovel, but she did not take it to use it or borrow it. She carried it down my driveway, across the street, and around the back of the community clubhouse that sat at the entrance to our subdivision. I watched the footage 3 times, my anger building with each replay. Patricia had stolen my shovel. Not just this one, almost certainly the other 2 as well. But why? What possible reason could the HOA president have for stealing my snow removal equipment? I got dressed quickly, not bothering with breakfast, and headed straight over to the clubhouse. The building was small, just a single room with a kitchenette that we used for HOA meetings and the occasional neighborhood event. I walked around to the back, where the maintenance shed was located. The door was unlocked, and inside I found exactly what I expected. All 3 of my snow shovels were there, leaning against the wall along with a collection of other items. I recognized a welcome mat that had disappeared from my neighbor Tom's front door last month. There were several garden gnomes, a couple of potted plants, a decorative flag, and even a mailbox that looked like it had been ripped right off its post. Patricia had been stealing things from all over the neighborhood. I took photos of everything, making sure to get clear shots of my shovels, and then I pulled out my phone and called her. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Good morning, Isaac. What can I do for you?" "You can explain why my snow shovels are in the HOA storage shed," I said, not bothering with pleasantries. There was a pause, just long enough for me to know she was calculating her response. "Oh, those shovels. I confiscated them." "Confiscated them? On what grounds?" "HOA Regulations, Section 7, Subsection 3, she said, as if this explained everything. "No equipment, tools, or utilitarian items may be stored in view of the street. That includes front porches. It is unsightly and decreases property values." I felt my jaw clench. "Patricia, it is a snow shovel. I keep it on my porch during winter so I can actually use it when it snows. The rules do not make exceptions for convenience, Isaac. If you would like to store your shovel, you need to keep it in your garage or another enclosed space. I have sent multiple notices about this to the entire neighborhood." "I never got any notice about snow shovels," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "And even if there is such a rule, you cannot just take my property. That is theft." "It is not theft, it is enforcement. The items are in storage, not disposed of. You can retrieve them once you agree to comply with the regulations. So you are holding my property hostage until I do what you say. I am maintaining community standards." Perhaps if you attended HOA meetings, you would be more familiar with the rules we voted on. I wanted to reach through the phone and shake her. "Patricia, I need those shovels right now. There is 1.5 feet of snow on my driveway." "Then I suggest you retrieve them from the storage shed and keep them in an appropriate location going forward. Good day, Isaac." She hung up before I could respond. I stood there in the cold, staring at my phone, absolutely furious. I grabbed my shovels from the shed and hauled them back to my house, but I knew this was not over. Patricia had just admitted to taking my property and holding it without permission. That was illegal, HOA rules or not. Back at home, I spent the next hour shoveling my driveway while mentally planning my next steps. I had the security footage showing Patricia stealing my shovel. I had photos of all the confiscated items in the shed. I had the recorded phone call where she admitted to taking my property. This was more than enough evidence. After I finished the driveway and warmed up with some hot coffee, I started doing research. Colorado has pretty clear laws about HOAs and what they can and cannot do. While associations do have some enforcement powers, they cannot just take your property without due process. They have to send written notice of violations, give you a chance to cure the violation, and go through a proper hearing process. Even then, they cannot actually steal your stuff. They can fine you, put liens on your property, or take you to court, but they cannot just confiscate things. I also looked into small claims court. In Colorado, you can sue for up to $7,500 without needing a lawyer. The filing fee was reasonable, and the process seemed straightforward. I would need to prove that Patricia had taken my property without permission, and that I had suffered damages as a result. Between the cost of having to buy multiple shovels, the time wasted, and the potential for punitive damages given her clear abuse of power, I had a solid case. But before I went the legal route, I decided to try one more time to resolve this reasonably. I pulled up the HOA bylaws on my computer and started reading through them carefully. It took me about an hour to get through all the legalese, but I finally found Section 7, subsection 3 that Patricia had mentioned. Exterior storage of equipment, machinery, recreational vehicles, boats, or commercial vehicles is prohibited. All such items must be stored in garages or other fully enclosed structures. That was it. The rule said nothing about tools on porches, nothing about snow shovels specifically, nothing about items actively in use. It was clearly meant to prevent people from parking boats in their driveways or leaving lawn mowers in their front yards. Patricia was massively overreaching in her interpretation. Armed with this information, I decided to attend the next HOA meeting. They were held on the third Tuesday of every month at 7 p.m. in the clubhouse. That gave me about a week and a half to prepare. In the meantime, I kept my shovels on my front porch, and I made sure my security camera was running 24/7. Patricia struck again 4 days later. I got another motion alert, this time at 7:15 a.m. on a Tuesday. I watched on my phone as she marched up to my porch, grabbed both of my shovels and carried them back to the storage shed. This time, I did not even bother confronting her. I just saved the footage, went to retrieve my shovels, and added this incident to my growing file of evidence. I also started talking to my neighbors. It turned out I was not the only one who had issues with Patricia. Tom from across the street told me she had cited him for having his trash cans visible from the road, even though it was trash day and the cans were at the curb. Sandra, 2 houses down, had been fined $300 for planting flowers that were not on the approved list. Mike at the end of the block was in a fight with the HOA over the color he had painted his shutters, which Patricia claimed was not an approved shade of brown. Everyone had stories, but no one wanted to make waves. The HOA had the power to put liens on your house if you did not pay fines, and Patricia was vindictive enough to make your life miserable if you challenged her. Most people just paid the fines, followed the rules, and tried to stay off her radar, but I was not most people. I had documentation, I had evidence, and I was not going to let some power-hungry HOA president steal my property and get away with it. The Tuesday of the HOA meeting arrived, and I showed up at the clubhouse at 6:55 p.m. with a folder full of printed photos, a printed transcript of my phone call with Patricia, and my laptop loaded with the security footage. About 20 other homeowners were there, sitting in folding chairs arranged in rows facing a table at the front where the board members sat. Patricia was at the center of the table, flanked by the vice president, a mild-mannered guy named Robert who clearly let Patricia run the show, and the secretary, a woman named Donna who spent most of the meeting typing on her laptop. Patricia looked up as I walked in, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. She knew why I was there. The meeting started with the usual boring stuff. They approved the minutes from last meeting, went over the budget, discussed plans for landscaping the common areas in the spring. I sat through it all patiently, waiting for the open forum section at the end where homeowners could bring up concerns. Finally, at 7:48 p.m., Patricia folded her hands on the table and said, "We will now open the floor for homeowner comments. Please keep your remarks brief and relevant to HOA matters." I stood up immediately. I would like to address a serious issue regarding theft and abuse of power by the HOA president. The room went silent. Every head turned to look at me. Patricia's expression hardened. "That is a serious accusation, Isaac," she said coldly. "I hope you have evidence to support it." "I do," I said, opening my folder. "Over the past 3 weeks, you have stolen my property on 3 separate occasions. I have security camera footage of you taking my snow shovels from my front porch and hiding them in the storage shed." I opened my laptop and pulled up the first video, turning the screen so the other homeowners could see. The footage played, showing Patricia clear as day grabbing my shovel and walking away with it. There were gasps and murmurs from the crowd. "That is not theft," Patricia said, her voice rising. "I already explained this to you. You were in violation of HOA regulations. I confiscated prohibited items." "Except I was not in violation," I said, pulling out a copy of the bylaws. Section 7, subsection 3 refers to equipment and machinery storage, not tools in active use on a front porch. A snow shovel during winter is not storage, it is a necessity. And even if I was in violation, you have no legal authority to take my property. You have to follow due process, which includes written notice, an opportunity to cure, and a hearing. You did none of that. I sent a neighborhood-wide email about porch violations, Patricia said defensively. An email is not a formal written notice, and it did not even mention snow shovels specifically. But let's say you had sent proper notice. That still does not give you the right to steal. You could have fined me, you could have taken me to court, but you cannot just take my things. That is conversion, and it is illegal. The other homeowners were watching this exchange like a tennis match. I could see some of them nodding in agreement while others looked uncomfortable with the confrontation. Robert, the vice president, cleared his throat. "Patricia, is this true?" "Did you take his shovels?" "I confiscated them for an HOA violation," she repeated stubbornly. "It is within my authority as president to enforce the rules." "Actually, it is not," I said. "I spoke with a lawyer this week. The HOA has no authority to seize personal property, even for violations. That is a power reserved for law enforcement and only with a warrant. What you did is textbook theft." "This is ridiculous," Patricia snapped. "I was doing my job. If everyone just left their tools and junk on their porches, this neighborhood would look like a trailer park." "It is a snow shovel, Patricia, not junk. And you did not just take my shovels. I found a whole collection of items in that storage shed. Welcome mats, garden decorations, a mailbox. How much of our neighbor's property have you stolen?" Now people were really talking, looking at each other with surprised expressions. Tom stood up. "She took my welcome mat. I thought it just blew away in the wind." Sandra raised her hand. "She took my garden gnome last summer, said it was not in keeping with the aesthetic of the neighborhood." More people started speaking up, sharing their own stories of items that had disappeared. Patricia's face was turning red, and I could see her struggling to maintain control. "Everyone, please. she said, her voice sharp. These were all violations of our HOA covenants. I have been enforcing the rules that you all agreed to when you bought your homes here. No, I said firmly. You have been interpreting the rules in the most extreme way possible and using your position to harass homeowners. And when you take people's property without permission, that is not enforcement, that is theft. So what do you want? Patricia demanded. An apology? Fine. I am sorry I tried to maintain property values in this neighborhood. That is not an apology, that is sarcasm. What I want is for you to return all of the items you have taken from homeowners, to stop this practice immediately, and to face consequences for your actions. Since you refuse to acknowledge that what you did was wrong, I am taking you to small claims court. The room erupted in chatter. Patricia stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You are going to sue me. Over a snow shovel. Over 3 snow shovels, the time and money I spent replacing them, and the principle of the matter. You abused your position, violated my rights, and when confronted, you showed no remorse. So yes, I am suing you. This is insane, Patricia said, looking to Robert and Donna for support. They both looked extremely uncomfortable and said nothing. You people are witnessing a vindictive homeowner trying to undermine the HOA because he does not want to follow simple rules. Actually, said an older man I did not know in the back row, it sounds like he is standing up to a bully. I have been in this neighborhood for 8 years, and the HOA has gotten more and more controlling under your leadership, Patricia. Maybe it is time for a change. Several people voiced their agreement. Patricia looked around the room, realizing she was losing support, and her expression turned nasty. Fine, she said. Waste your money on a lawsuit. I will see you in court and we will let a judge decide who is right. That is exactly what I intend to do, I said calmly. I gathered my materials and walked out of the clubhouse, my heart pounding but feeling a sense of satisfaction. I had made my point publicly, and now I was going to make it legally. The next day, I went downtown to the Combined Courts building in Colorado Springs and filed my small claims case. I was suing Patricia Henderson personally for $240 in damages, which covered the cost of 3 snow shovels and my time. I also requested the maximum amount in punitive damages allowed, which would send a message that her behavior was unacceptable. The court clerk was helpful, walking me through the paperwork and explaining the process. I would need to serve Patricia with the lawsuit, then we would both appear before a judge for a hearing. The whole thing would take about 6 to 8 weeks from filing to resolution. I paid the filing fee, got my case number, and arranged for Patricia to be served with the papers through a professional process server. I wanted everything done by the book. Patricia received the papers 3 days later. I know because she called me immediately, absolutely furious. You actually did it, she said, her voice shaking with rage. You are actually suing me. I told you I would, I said calmly. You stole my property. There are consequences for that. This is harassment. I am going to countersue you for filing a frivolous lawsuit. It is not frivolous, Patricia. I have video evidence, photographs, witnesses, and your own admission that you took my shovels. This is the most solid case I have ever seen. I was enforcing HOA rules. You were stealing. There is a difference. See you in court. I hung up before she could respond. Over the next few weeks, Patricia tried several tactics to get me to drop the suit. She sent me a formal HOA violation notice for my shovels, thinking that would somehow justify her actions retroactively. I ignored it. She had her lawyer send me a letter claiming I was harassing her, and that she would seek a restraining order. I responded with a copy of the security footage and a note that said I would be happy to add her lawyer's letter to my evidence file. She even tried to get the HOA to fine me for bringing the organization into disrepute. But at the next board meeting, Robert and Donna voted against her, and the motion failed. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that there was talk of recalling Patricia from the board, but that was a separate process that would take months. Finally, the court date arrived. It was a Wednesday morning in late March, and I took the day off work to prepare. I wore a suit, brought multiple copies of all my evidence organized in a binder, and showed up at the courthouse 30 minutes early. Patricia arrived right before our scheduled time, accompanied by a man in a cheap suit who I assumed was her lawyer. In small claims court, lawyers cannot actually represent you or speak for you, but they can sit with you and provide advice. I was representing myself fully, which honestly felt more empowering. We were called into the courtroom at 10:15 a.m. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Judge Martinez, and she had the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who had seen every petty dispute imaginable. We sat at tables facing her bench, Patricia on one side, me on the other. "This is case number 2026 SC 4419, Isaac Coleman versus Patricia Henderson," Judge Martinez said, looking at her paperwork. "Mr. Coleman, this is your claim. Please state your case." I stood up, feeling nervous but prepared. "Your Honor, I am suing Miss Henderson for theft of my property and abuse of her position as HOA president. Over a period of 3 weeks in January, Miss Henderson stole 3 snow shovels from my front porch, despite my need for them during winter storms. When confronted, she claimed she was enforcing HOA rules, but she never provided proper notice, never gave me an opportunity to cure any alleged violation, and had no legal authority to take my property in the first place. I have video evidence of her taking the shovels, photographs of where she hid them, and a recorded phone call where she admits to taking them." Judge Martinez looked interested. "You have video?" "Yes, Your Honor." I installed a security camera after the first 2 shovels disappeared, and I captured the 3rd theft on camera. "Let me see it." I pulled out my laptop, which I had cleared with the court clerk beforehand, and played the footage. Judge Martinez watched silently as Patricia walked up to my porch, looked around, grabbed my shovel, and carried it away. When the video ended, the judge looked at Patricia. "Miss Henderson, is that you in the video?" Patricia stood up, her face flushed. "Yes, Your Honor, but I was not stealing. I was confiscating an item that violated our HOA covenants. Mr. Coleman had been repeatedly warned about keeping utilitarian items visible from the street." "You have documentation of these warnings?" Judge Martinez asked. Patricia fumbled with her folder. "I sent a neighborhood-wide email about porch violations." "You have a copy of that email?" "Not with me, but I can provide it." "What about specific written notice to Mr. Coleman about his shovels?" "The email was sent to everyone, including him." Judge Martinez looked at me. "Mr. Coleman, did you receive this email?" "I received an email in December about holiday decorations needing to be removed by January 10th, I said. "But there was nothing about snow shovels or tools. I have a copy of that email if you would like to see it." I pulled it up on my laptop and showed it to the judge. She read it quickly and nodded. "This says nothing about shovels." "Miss Henderson, what specific HOA rule was Mr. Coleman violating?" "Section 7, subsection 3 of our covenants," Patricia said confidently. "No equipment or tools may be stored in view of the street." "Mr. Coleman, do you have a copy of your HOA covenants?" "Yes, Your Honor." I pulled out the relevant section and handed it to her. Judge Martinez read it carefully. "This section refers to storage of equipment, machinery, and vehicles," she said. "It seems designed to prevent people from parking boats or RVs in their driveways. Would you agree, Miss Henderson, It says equipment and tools, Patricia insisted. A shovel is a tool. A shovel actively being used during winter is not storage, Judge Martinez said. But let's set aside the question of whether there was actually a violation. Miss Henderson, even if Mr. Coleman was violating an HOA rule, what gave you the authority to take his property? I am the HOA president. I am responsible for enforcement. HOA enforcement typically involves fines, hearings, and legal action. It does not involve physically taking someone's belongings. Are you aware of that? Patricia hesitated. I was maintaining community standards. That is not an answer to my question. Did you have legal authority to take his shovels? I had board authority. Did the board vote to give you the power to confiscate homeowner property? Patricia said nothing. Judge Martinez made a note on her paperwork. Mr. Coleman, you mentioned a phone call. May I hear that? I played the recording on my phone, the one where Patricia admitted to confiscating my shovels and said I could have them back once I agreed to comply. Judge Martinez listened to the whole thing, her expression growing more stern. Miss Henderson, in this recording, you essentially admit to taking his property and holding it hostage until he agreed to follow rules that you cannot even prove he violated. Is that correct? I was doing my job, Patricia said, and I could hear the defensiveness in her voice. Your job does not include theft. Let me be very clear about this. HOAs have certain powers granted to them by state law and their governing documents. Those powers include the ability to fine homeowners, to put liens on properties for unpaid dues, and to enforce architectural and maintenance standards through proper legal channels. What they cannot do is take someone's personal property without permission. That is conversion, and it is illegal regardless of your position in the HOA. Patricia's lawyer leaned over and whispered something to her. She looked pale now, realizing this was not going her way. Mr. Coleman, what are your damages? Judge Martinez asked. I had to purchase 3 snow shovels because Miss Henderson kept stealing them, I said. The total cost was $240. I am also requesting punitive damages because her behavior was willful and malicious, and she showed no remorse even when confronted with the illegality of her actions. Miss Henderson, do you have any evidence or witnesses to support your position? Patricia opened her mouth, closed it, and then said, I was enforcing community standards that benefit all homeowners. That is not evidence. Do you have anything else? No, Your Honor. Judge Martinez leaned back in her chair. I have reviewed the evidence presented, and this case is straightforward. Miss Henderson, you took Mr. Coleman's property without permission and without legal authority. Your justification that you were enforcing HOA rules does not hold water, both because the rules do not clearly prohibit what he was doing, and because you did not follow proper procedures even if they did. You failed to provide adequate notice, you failed to give him an opportunity to cure, and you had no authority to physically take his belongings. This is textbook conversion. Patricia started to speak, but Judge Martinez held up a hand. I am not finished. What concerns me most is your complete lack of understanding of the limits of your authority. You are not law enforcement. You are not a judge. You are a volunteer board member of a homeowners association, and you have been abusing that position to harass your neighbors. That behavior stops now. She looked down at her notes and then back up at us. I am ruling in favor of Mr. Coleman. Miss Henderson, you will pay him $240 in direct damages for the cost of the shovels. Additionally, I am awarding punitive damages in the amount of $1,000 to send a clear message that this behavior is unacceptable. You will also pay Mr. Coleman's court costs and filing fees. That brings the total judgment to $1,312. Patricia looked like she had been slapped. Your Honor, that is excessive for snow shovels. It is appropriate for theft and abuse of power. You are fortunate Mr. Coleman did not press criminal charges. You have 30 days to pay the judgment. If you fail to do so, Mr. Coleman can pursue collection, including garnishment of wages or liens on your property. You understand? Yes, Your Honor, Patricia said, her voice barely a whisper. Mr. Coleman, is there anything else? No, Your Honor, thank you. Then we are adjourned. Miss Henderson, I strongly suggest you educate yourself on the legal limits of HOA authority before you continue in your position. This kind of behavior could result in personal liability for you and significant legal problems for your HOA. We filed out of the courtroom. Patricia and her lawyer rushed past me without making eye contact. I stood in the hallway for a moment, letting the victory sink in. I had won. Not only had I gotten my money back, but a judge had officially ruled that Patricia had broken the law and publicly called out her abuse of power. The story spread through the neighborhood fast. By that evening, everyone knew what had happened in court. I got texts from neighbors congratulating me, thanking me for standing up to Patricia, and sharing their own relief that someone had finally held her accountable. Patricia paid the judgment 2 weeks later, the full amount delivered by check with a law firm's return address on the envelope. She did not include a note or any form of apology. At the next HOA meeting, which I attended, the atmosphere was completely different. Patricia was quiet and subdued, and when it came time for elections, 3 other homeowners who had never been involved before threw their hats in the ring for board positions. By the end of the meeting, we had voted to expand the board from 3 members to 5, and 2 of the new members were people who wanted to reform the HOA's practices. Patricia remained president, but her power was significantly checked. The board voted to revise the enforcement procedures, requiring proper written notice, reasonable cure periods, and board votes before any fines could be issued. They also explicitly prohibited any board member from taking or confiscating homeowner property for any reason. Within 2 months, Patricia announced she was stepping down as president, citing personal reasons. Robert took over as president, and the neighborhood collectively breathed a sigh of relief. The new board returned all of the confiscated items from the storage shed to their owners, and several people discovered things they had not even realized were missing. I kept my snow shovels on my front porch for the rest of the winter, and no one said a word. When spring came and I did not need them anymore, I put them in my garage, not because I had to, but because it made sense. The whole experience taught me something important about standing up for yourself. For years, Patricia had gotten away with bullying people because everyone was afraid to challenge her. They figured it was easier to just go along, pay the fines, follow the arbitrary rules, and hope she would not target them next. But bullies rely on that fear. They count on people being too intimidated or too tired to fight back. When I decided to install that security camera and document everything, I was not thinking about becoming some kind of neighborhood hero. I just wanted my property back and to prove that what Patricia was doing was wrong. But sometimes, one person standing up is all it takes to break the spell. Once I challenged her publicly and won in court, other people felt empowered to speak up too. The small claims process itself was not as scary as I thought it would be. Yes, it took time and effort to gather evidence and prepare my case. Yes, there was some stress involved in confronting Patricia and going through the legal system. But the filing fees were reasonable, the court staff was helpful, and the judge was fair. I did not need an expensive lawyer or months of litigation. I just needed documentation, the truth, and the willingness to follow through. What really mattered was the principle. Patricia had stolen from me, not once but 3 times. She had used her position to justify illegal behavior, and when called out, she had doubled down instead of apologizing. That kind of abuse of power, even in something as small as a homeowners association, can make people's lives miserable. It creates an environment where everyone is constantly looking over their shoulder, afraid to plant the wrong flowers or paint their door the wrong color or leave a shovel on their porch. After the court case, I started paying more attention to HOA laws and homeowner rights. I learned that HOAs are bound by state statutes and cannot just make up whatever rules they want. They have to follow their own bylaws, provide due process, and respect property rights. When they overstep, homeowners have legal recourse. The problem is that most people do not know their rights or do not think it is worth fighting over. I also learned that HOA board positions attract a certain type of person. Some genuinely want to help maintain the neighborhood and make it a better place to live. But others, like Patricia, are drawn to the tiny bit of power it provides. They want to control things, to tell people what to do, to feel important. And when you give someone like that unchecked authority, even in a small volunteer role, they can cause real damage. The neighborhood changed after Patricia stepped down. The new board was more reasonable, more transparent, and more focused on actual issues like maintaining common areas and organizing community events. They stopped sending out petty violation notices for minor aesthetic issues and started listening to homeowner concerns. The clubhouse started getting used for neighborhood barbecues and holiday parties instead of just adversarial board meetings. I ran into Patricia a few times over the following months. She would see me coming and turn the other direction, or if we passed on the street, she would stare straight ahead and pretend I did not exist. I did not take it personally. Some people cannot admit when they are wrong, and they would rather hold onto resentment than acknowledge their mistakes. My neighbor Tom invited me over for beers one evening in late May. We sat on his back deck, watching the sun set behind the mountains, and he thanked me again for taking Patricia to court. "You know, I was going to sell my house," he admitted. "The HOA stuff was driving me crazy. The fines, the complaints, the constant feeling like someone was watching to see if my grass was a 1/4 inch too long. I love this neighborhood, but I could not deal with Patricia anymore." "You are not selling now?" I asked. "No, things are so much better. It actually feels like a community instead of a dictatorship." He took a sip of his beer. "What you did mattered, man. You changed things for all of us." I appreciated the sentiment, but I did not feel like some kind of crusader. I had just wanted my snow shovels back, and to make sure Patricia could not keep stealing from people. The fact that it sparked bigger changes was a bonus, but it was not my original goal. Still, sitting there with Tom, looking out at the neighborhood that felt more relaxed and friendly than it had in years, I felt good about what I had done. Sometimes the right thing to do is also the hard thing to do, and you do not know if it will make a difference until you try. The following winter, we got our first major snowstorm in early December. I woke up to 10 inches of fresh powder and went out to my porch to grab my shovel. It was right where I had left it, undisturbed. I cleared my driveway, then helped Tom with his, and then we both went over to help Sandra, who was older and struggled with the heavy lifting. As we worked, I noticed something. All around the neighborhood, people had shovels on their porches. Some had them leaning against walls, some had them standing in decorative holders, some just had them lying on the ground. It was a small act of defiance, or maybe solidarity, or maybe just people not being afraid anymore. No one got violation notices. No one's shovels disappeared. The new board did not care about something as trivial as snow removal tools on porches during winter. They had actual neighborhood business to attend to, like budgeting for new playground equipment and organizing a street fair. I thought about Patricia sometimes, wondered if she had learned anything from the experience or if she just felt victimized and bitter. I hoped that maybe, somewhere deep down, she understood that she had gone too far and that the court ruling had been a necessary correction. But I did not lose sleep over it either way. I had done what I needed to do, the court had agreed I was right, and life had moved on. The whole saga, from that first missing shovel to the court judgment and its aftermath, took about 4 months. 4 months of frustration, documentation, legal process, and eventually resolution. It was not fun, and there were times I questioned whether it was worth the hassle for a few snow shovels. But looking back, I know I made the right choice, because it was never really about the shovels. It was about respect, property rights, and the idea that just because someone has a little bit of authority does not mean they can do whatever they want. Patricia had gotten comfortable abusing her position because no one challenged her. When I did challenge her with evidence and through proper legal channels, the system worked the way it was supposed to. That is the part that sticks with me most. The system worked. The judge listened to both sides, reviewed the evidence, applied the law, and made a fair ruling. It was not dramatic or complicated. It was just straightforward justice. I still live in Pinewood Heights. My relationship with the HOA is fine now, mostly because the board is made up of reasonable people who care about the neighborhood without being tyrants about it. I attend meetings occasionally, especially when there are important issues being discussed. I even volunteered to help with the neighborhood directory last year. Patricia moved away about a year after the court case. I heard she and her husband bought a condo in a different part of the city, somewhere without an HOA. I do not know if the lawsuit and the loss of her board position influenced that decision, but I imagine the neighborhood had become uncomfortable for her. When everyone knows you abused your power and got legally smacked down for it, it is probably hard to show your face at the grocery store or the mailbox. The new family that bought Patricia's house is nice. They have 2 young kids who play in the front yard, and they keep a garden gnome on their porch that makes me smile every time I see it. It is one of those tacky ones, painted in bright colors, holding a fishing rod. Under the old regime, Patricia would have confiscated it within a week. Now, no one cares. It is just a garden gnome. I tell this story sometimes when people complain about their HOAs or feel powerless against bureaucratic overreach in their neighborhoods. The response is usually the same. People are surprised that I actually took someone to court over snow shovels, and they are even more surprised that I won and that it made a difference. But that is the point. Most injustices are not grand or newsworthy. They are small, daily frustrations. Someone taking your property. Someone abusing their authority. Someone making your life harder for no good reason. And most of the time, people put up with it because fighting back seems like too much trouble. Sometimes, though, fighting back is exactly what needs to happen. Not with anger or revenge, but with documentation, legal process, and a commitment to doing things the right way. I did not yell at Patricia or vandalize her property or start a smear campaign. I installed a camera, gathered evidence, filed a lawsuit, and let the legal system do its job. That approach worked because it was legitimate and because I was in the right. If I had been violating HOA rules and Patricia had followed proper procedures, I would have lost. But she did not follow procedures. She did not have the authority she claimed, and the rules she was enforcing did not even apply to my situation. When you shine a light on that kind of behavior, it crumbles. The security camera footage was the key to everything. Without that video, it would have been my word against hers, and she could have claimed she was just moving the shovel for legitimate reasons, or that she had permission, or any number of lies. But the video was undeniable. It showed her sneaking around, looking to make sure no one was watching, taking my property and hiding it. That footage convinced the judge and made the case open and shut. I still have that camera up, and I keep all my security footage backed up to the cloud. Not because I am expecting more trouble, but because it is good practice. You never know when you might need documentation of something. Whether it is a package theft, a car accident in front of your house, or just proof of when you did or did not do something, having video can be invaluable. My advice to anyone dealing with an overreaching HOA or any similar situation is this: document everything. Keep copies of all communications. Record phone calls if your state allows it, which Colorado does. Take photos and videos. Create a paper trail, and know your rights. Read your HOA bylaws. Understand what they can and cannot do, and do not just accept someone's word that they have authority to do something. Also, do not be afraid to use the legal system. Small claims court exists for exactly these kinds of disputes. It is designed to be accessible to regular people without lawyers, and the process is much simpler than you would think. You file some paperwork, pay a fee, present your case, and a judge makes a decision. The whole thing can be resolved in a couple of months. If I had just let Patricia get away with taking my shovels, she would have kept doing it to other people. She would have kept expanding her interpretation of what the HOA rules allowed, kept confiscating property, kept bullying homeowners into submission. By standing up to her, I stopped that cycle. And the court judgment sent a message not just to Patricia, but to the entire board and neighborhood that there are limits to HOA power. I do not think of myself as a hero or an activist. I am just a guy who wanted his snow shovels back and was willing to go through the proper channels to make that happen. But if my experience encourages even one other person to stand up for themselves when they are being treated unfairly, then sharing this story is worthwhile. The neighborhood is better now. The HOA functions the way it is supposed to, maintaining property values and common areas without making everyone miserable. People are not afraid to put decorations on their porches, or paint their shutters a different shade, or plant flowers that are not on some approved list. There is still oversight, still rules, but they are reasonable rules enforced in reasonable ways. And me, I keep my snow shovels wherever I want. Usually on my front porch during winter because that is where they are most convenient. No one has touched them since the lawsuit. No one would dare. But more than that, no one wants to. The new board does not care about petty issues like that. They have better things to do. Every time I grab that shovel to clear my driveway after a snowstorm, I think about the journey it took to protect my right to keep it there. From discovering it missing that first time, to installing the camera, to watching Patricia steal it on video, to filing the lawsuit, to standing in front of Judge Martinez and presenting my case, to finally hearing that I had won. It was a lot of work for a $60 shovel, but it was worth every bit of effort, because in the end, it was not about the money or even about the shovel itself. It was about drawing a line and saying this far and no further. It was about proving that even someone with a title and a position does not have unlimited power. It was about making sure that in my neighborhood, in my community, people would be treated fairly and with respect. Patricia learned that lesson the hard way in front of a judge, with a legal judgment against her, and the humiliation of having her behavior publicly called out. I do not take joy in her embarrassment, but I do not regret causing it either. She brought it on herself by refusing to acknowledge the limits of her authority and by treating her neighbors like subjects instead of equals. The check I received for $1,312 is long since deposited and spent. I do not even remember what I used the money for. Probably just everyday expenses, groceries, bills, the normal stuff of life. But the principle behind that check, the statement it represented, that stays with me. It was validation. Proof that I had been right, that justice exists, and that standing up for yourself can actually work. I have told this story to friends, family, and coworkers over the years since it happened. The reactions are always interesting. Some people think I was petty for suing over snow shovels. Others think I should have pressed criminal charges. Most people are just amazed that I went through with it and won. What people do not always understand is that letting something like this slide has consequences. If I had not stood up to Patricia, she would have continued her reign of terror over the neighborhood. More items would have been confiscated. More fines would have been issued. More people would have felt harassed in their own homes. By taking action, I changed the trajectory of the entire HOA. That is the power of accountability. Patricia could bully people as long as no one held her accountable. The moment someone did, the moment her actions were exposed and judged to be wrong, her power evaporated. She could not hide behind her title or her interpretations of the rules anymore. She was just someone who had stolen property and gotten caught. I think about alternate timelines sometimes. What if I had not installed that camera? What if I had not saved all the evidence? What if I had decided it was not worth the trouble to file a lawsuit? Patricia would still be HOA president, probably, still confiscating things and issuing arbitrary fines. The neighborhood would still be walking on eggshells, afraid to decorate their homes or leave anything visible that might trigger her ire. But that is not what happened. I did install the camera. I did save the evidence. I did file the lawsuit. And because of those choices, things got better for everyone. Sometimes I still see my neighbors out clearing snow in winter, and we will chat while we work, complaining about the cold or the amount of snow or sharing techniques for efficient shoveling. It is normal, friendly, the kind of thing neighbors should do. And our shovels are all right there on our porches, visible, accessible, exactly where they should be. No one is coming to take them anymore. That battle was fought and won in a courthouse in Colorado Springs, with security footage and legal arguments and a judge who saw through the nonsense and called it what it was: theft, abuse of power, unacceptable behavior that warranted financial consequences. I won that case 4 years ago now, and my life has moved on in a lot of ways. I got a promotion at work. I started dating someone, though that did not work out. I adopted a dog, a retriever mix named Copper, who loves the snow. But the neighborhood, the HOA, the feeling of living in a community that respects its members, that has stayed good. And that, more than anything, is what makes me glad I went through with the lawsuit. Not the money, not the satisfaction of being right, but the lasting change it created. Patricia is gone, the HOA board is reasonable, and people can live in their homes without fear of arbitrary punishment from overzealous volunteers. My snow shovels are still in the garage right now, waiting for winter to come back around. When it does, they will go back on the porch, ready for use. And they will stay there, untouched by anyone but me, exactly as they should be. Because in this neighborhood, in this community, we learned the hard way that property rights matter, that due process matters, and that no one, not even the HOA president, is above the law. That is the story of how my stolen snow shovel ended up in small claims court and changed my neighborhood forever. It is not the most dramatic story, not the kind of thing that makes national news. But it mattered to me, And it mattered to my neighbors, and it taught all of us an important lesson about standing up for ourselves when we are treated unfairly. If you find yourself in a similar situation, whether with an HOA or any other authority figure abusing their power, I hope you will remember this story. Document everything. Know your rights. Use the legal system. And do not let anyone tell you that standing up for yourself over something small is not worth it. Sometimes the small things are the most important because they are the ones that affect your daily life. My 3 snow shovels cost me $180 total, plus filing fees and time. But they earned me $1,312 in judgment, plus a neighborhood free from tyranny, plus the knowledge that I stood up when it mattered. That is a return on investment I will take any day. And whenever winter comes back and the snow starts falling, I will walk out to my front porch, grab my shovel, and clear my driveway with the satisfaction of knowing that it is mine. It is right where it should be, and no one has any right to take it from me. Because a judge said so, and because I made sure of it.